who are here, and welcome to those who watch the recording at a later stage. Now, as I said before, this is an opportunity, or the reason why we did announce the Q&A is to give people an opportunity to ask questions about energy attachments and how they can actually affect our well-being. So I'm asking those that are here live, Richa and iPhone 34, if you have any questions, can you please put them in the chat? At least it will give me an opportunity to get started. Any kind of questions? Because I don't want. Oh, yes, okay. How can we tell if we have an entity attached? Very important, very simple, but a very important question and a very complex question. How can we tell if it is a good one or not? All right. Thank you so much, Richard. It makes it much easier for me to get into the flow of things. So let's answer your first question. How can we see or feel or tell if we have energy attachments? There are various things that can give us an indication of a possible entity that may have latched onto our energy field. Number one, I would say would be is if you feel that you have tried everything possible to change your habits, to move towards, let's say, you have got the habit of repetitive thought patterns and you can't shake them off. Things like anxiety, fear, very often they are linked to energy attachments that actually siphon off our energy and actually live from our own energy field. So, thought patterns, repetitive thought patterns, finding it difficult to change old habits. Then, if you feel like you have things happening, like, for example, constantly or frequently injuring yourself, like knocking yourself or cutting yourself, or anything like that can be an indication. If you feel like permanently drained without any kind of energy, of course, there are physical elements that lead to it. In a sense, when it comes to our energy field, it can have various reasons of why we feel tired and exhausted. But in general, if you feel you're doing everything right, you have a decent quality sleep, you do your exercise and have a balanced nutrition, and still you feel constantly tired, constantly drained, fatigued, reoccurring dreams, or kind of, I wouldn't necessarily go and say nightmares, but if you have dreams where things feel a little bit weird or strange, dreams around being afraid, being anxious, that could be also an indication of a spirit or energy attachment. And then uh, basically, if we feel that we are run by a programming that is not us, okay? That can be an indication that something is latched onto our energy field. Just to give you an example, uh, have been in situations where I was working with clients and I came off a phone conversation and I felt completely off. I felt completely, um, when I say off, out of balance, difficulties to concentrate, didn't sleep very well, and some weird thoughts popping up in my head where I felt my energy field wasn't protected enough. I didn't sort of pay attention to my own protection. And while I was conversing with these clients or with some of the clients, when I came off the conversation, I thought something is not I'm not my normal self. So these are some of the indications of how we can tell that energies have attached to us. In this context, I might just sort of very briefly touch upon certain types of energies. So there are certain energies that are attached. I'm talking about earthbound spirits, for example. These are people, humans that have deceased or moved on, transitioned over, but they still feel as if they are alive. So basically, they are dead. They have dropped their physical shell, but they are still moving around and floating around and haven't found their way, you can say, to source, to the light, whatever you feel to choose. And they can actually then use us, use the physical vessel as an instrument to really relive their or to continue live their habits. For example, could be habits of smoking or alcohol or any kind of addiction, but also thought patterns. These are some of the things that are very frequently that can be very frequently experienced when it comes to entity attachment, specifically to earthbound spirits. They don't have a physical body, but they siphon off the energy from our physical body to continue living, feeding off, feeding their own um, addictions, behaviors, thought patterns in any shape or form. Richard, sort of, does that answer your question for now? Any questions that pop up from what I have spoken? So please sort of put them in the chat. Then, how can we tell if it is a good one or um, a negative a negative spirit or actually a good spirit? So there are, of course, when it comes to entities, energies, there are what we might call our spirit guides. Okay. If you know, or you know that whatever is working with you or working through you, if it is a good one, basically they will never interfere. They will never force themselves onto into your presence. They only step forward if they are being asked, and they only pretty much work for your highest good. So they don't sort of make you do things where you feel like, oh God, why did I do this? Even though I don't feel like um, I should have done that, if that makes sense. So that would be an indication that there are some entities that are not necessarily wanting to be there for your own good and in your own favor. And the tricky bit here is some of those darker entities, they can be quite deceptive. So they can give you the impression as if they are of high source frequency light, highest vibrational order, but that might not be the case. So how do you realize if that's the situation? There is an element, and especially when you work with entities and when you speak or when you help entities to clear and to move and to move on into the different realms or different realities, um, if it is a deceptive spirit that pretends to be your spirit guide, you will notice that there is an element of ego to it. So basically, they feed to your ego. What I'm saying here are, and sometimes when I speak to people, um, and they say, "Oh, you are the most wonderful, the greatest person. I'm so grateful," and it's all over the top kind of positivity, then I know, or I'm just really feeling into the situation. And very often it's that overly positive, overly exaggerated sense of making you wanting to love them, which is an indication that there are some energies that are not quite um, there meant for the highest good, if that makes any sense. So what I'm saying is earthbound spirits in on one side can be very egoistical in their attitude, very judgmental. They have their own agenda, whereas spirit guides have no agenda. So the positive, the good ones have no agenda. They have no residue basically to or no intention to improve or to impose themselves onto a person. So earthbound spirits often they put their ailment onto the host. Okay? So what that means is, let's say you're working in the healing field, you're working as a healer, and then you leave the session and you feel the symptoms that actually your client has all of a sudden have transferred onto you, which basically could be an indication that there's some attachment that had latched onto your energy field, which is not necessarily for the highest good. So, um, spirit guides as such can be felt as, how shall I express that? As light. The energy is quite light, quite floaty, quite sparkly, um, crystalline, clear energy around it. Whereas earthbound spirits have got a bit of a shadowy, heavy, clinging kind of feel. Earthbound spirits um, have usually or are usually of a lower vibration, and they are, I'm just looking at my notes here. Um, yeah, it's basically the best way to discern between the two is feel into the frequency of the energy around you, and that will give you a very good idea. And if you feel, for example, you're sitting there in meditation and you feel that you are connected to source, you feel like you are connected to your spirit guides, and the spirit guides tells you you should do this, you have to do that, basically imposing their viewpoint onto you. For me, that would be a red flag to look at what's actually going on here. Where is this energy coming from? I hope this answers the second question, uh, Richa, with regards to spirit guides and basically how can we discern if they are good ones or if they are bad energies. Can I just get an understanding here? Who from those on the chat have actually listened to the webinar that I did a couple of weeks ago? Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. So you are familiar with the content that I have provided some time ago during the webinar. Thank you. And may I just check iPhone 34? Have you been able to watch the webinar that I did, the free webinar or the webinar that I did for APA, for the Ayurvedic Professionals Association? Have you got a bit of an understanding around spirit guides? Yes or no? And if so, what are your questions? What are other questions? Okay, so what shall we do? I don't want to waste anybody's time. So what I will do is I will just briefly go through the different forms of attachments because that's something that I haven't actually um, covered during the webinar that I did some weeks ago. When I work with people, I can feel, I can sense, or in communication with the people, with the client, the first thing that I'm asking or that I establish is what kind of color would you give to this sensation? Because the color in itself can be an indication of what kind of spirit or attachment it is. So, for example, if people say, oh, this energy that makes me feel really kind of uncomfortable in my solar plexus, I feel like a grayish kind of energy, then I would think of, and there are a few other questions that I would ask, but it would put me in the thought process in the loop of thinking about earthbound spirits or often AI, artificial intelligence, that might be this particular energy that often presents in the color gray. Red often obviously represents angry earthbound spirits, usually earthbound spirits that have been killed or where there was a specific trauma that happened for them to die, to be thrown out of their physical body. They are very angry very often if the color red pops up. So if I ask people what color under the state of hypnosis, when people are in a theta brainwave state, I'll ask them, okay, so what kind of color would it be? If they say red, to me, something has happened to this human being that has left their physical body, a very traumatic event. If the color black comes up, it's very obvious. These are very dark entities. Um, and there are various categories within the darker entity realms. If there is a brown, if they say it's a kind of brownish color, then very often this is linked to addictions, specifically heroin or drug addictions. Someone who has been dying due to an addictive behavior, that energy often presents itself with a brownish color, and alcoholism, those who died of alcohol, overuse of alcohol, often they present themselves in a yellow color. And sometimes I do feel in the color and then I pick up the color myself. But when people are in a session, I usually ask them that discomfort, that energy, what kind of color it is. So we have covered roughly the earthbound spirits. So these are very, very common attachments. And one of the important information is to find out if this, um, and this is for me basically, this entity has had a human body. And that's when I will know that it is actually an earthbound spirit rather than um, a more, what you call it, nefarious entity, darker entity that basically has latched onto our field. So then what else have we got in terms of different entities? There are also, of course, um, attachments that can manifest because of somebody has done some curses or witchcraft, and this can be quite heavy. Basically, that falls under the same category of psychic vampirism. Basically, this is where another personality has been superimposed onto another person. So you can think of, okay, what is this to do? Where is the difference between schizophrenia, dual personality disorder, and this? Um, I don't want to go too deep into it, but there is a very fine line, and very often when there's a fragmentation of consciousness that is commonly observed in a person, um, that we could identify as person as multiple personality disorder. Very often, um, that's another type of energy or entity that presents itself at this point in time. So, for example, a person that has a certain illness, um, a certain disease, can basically parasite latch onto that healthy person. And this can be described as psychic vampirism. So one day you feel completely fine, everything is okay, and then all of a sudden, without any warning signs, something is going on where you feel your health is compromised without any obvious reasons. This is very important to distinguish. So, and if people have casted, done some witchcraft or some cursing, um, that basically involves that a fragment of the person that has spoken the spell, done the witchcraft, is superimposed onto the personality of the person where this energy has basically latched itself onto. So that has been transmitted onto the victim in this situation. So I know this subject can be quite uncomfortable for people because, like I said in my webinar, there are a lot of there's a lot of stigma around energy and spirit attachments, and very often, and I truly stand by this, a lot of cases where we deal with mental disorders, or from an Ayurvedic perspective, Manasaroga disorders, very often there is an element of energy or spirit attachments linked to it. And by doing these energetic clearings, some of the symptoms, and in many cases also all of the symptoms of that mental disorder can actually be reversed. I'm not saying that we don't need the modern medical approach when it comes to psychiatric and psychological disorders. Absolutely not. But what I feel is lacking is looking at those energies, how they can attach, and what happens if you clear these energies. Before I come to Dan's question, just to share an example, I've had several cases actually, not just one, where people have approached me and say that their teenage children have started to cut themselves. So basically, self-harm as a means of expressing their pain. And once the energy attachment, once the energetic clearing has been done, that action actually stopped. So, and one of the cases, she was a friend of mine. She sadly passed away now herself. Her daughter ended up in a mental hospital, and I was working together with the mother, with the daughter, clearing those energies. And she is more, what I would say, quite happily now, 4 years later, has gone through her teenage years. She is an adult and she is quite healthy, quite happy, quite strong. And there are many of those cases that I can actually share. Um, so she was put on medications. And when people are on medications, unless you work with the psychiatrist, it's very difficult to do these energetic clearings. Because when they are on the medicines, there's a constant feedback loop. So you can clear and clear, but then the frequency of the medicine in itself basically opens up the energy field of these beings and it keeps coming back and back. So that's why it's important to establish the little bit of background information. Some people, no, let's answer Dan's question. So, are there ways we can protect ourselves? Of course, absolutely, there are. Um, how can you protect yourself? There are various ways and means. Basically, ensuring that you have yourself a very solid practice on a daily basis where you cleanse your energy field. And that could be done using meditation, that could be done using smudging, such as working with frankincense, working with sage. Frankincense has been used for thousands of years. In the ancient times, when babies were born, they were embalmed in frankincense to ward off any of those negative attachments that can manifest as a disease in a newly born baby. So they were actually massaged with frankincense oil. So frankincense, sage, Palo Santo, that's some of the ways of how you can clear your energy field. In saying that, sometimes it is not enough. And you will know when that's the case. You will know that you do everything possible. You have your routine, your rhythm, you do your meditation, you put your bubble around yourself. There are different practices that people can use. Um, Ground, cleanse, protect is, in my view, the mantra that should be, or that I'm inviting those who listen to this recording to incorporate in their daily rhythm. That means cleanse in the morning, for example. If you have a shower or when you have a shower, you can visualize the water washing down through your field, your systems, and your bodies like white light washing through your energy field. And then you can, as you stand in the shower, ground yourself, allowing this energy to being anchored into the earth, into the ground. And then when you step out of the shower, you can just visualize putting this invisible cloak of protection around you. So ground, cleanse, protect, and that in itself will provide a very effective way of actually preventing as much as possible those energy attachments to latch onto you. So I hope I answered that question. Talking more about walk-ins, you may have heard people talking about walk-ins. That means when a being from light, um, a light being, for example, needs a physical body to function, they can actually sort of walk into your energetic field. So basically, this can happen very often in a state of shock. For example, you, in a sense, a human being is in a situation, a car crash, all of a sudden, boom, life is gone. The person is in shock, and in that moment, a switch can um, happen. So, or for example, if a human being chooses to end his life or her life, a living person chooses to end the life cycle, um, then another um, exchange, another energy can come in. So basically, you may have the situation where people have tried to commit suicide, but they are not succeeding in it. And when they wake up, when they come out the other end, you feel like these people are completely different persons. So that means in that state, where in the process where they try to end their lives, in that situation, the soul um, leaves the physical body, and another uh, aspect, another fractal of that soul can come in, and this is what is called um, uh, can be can be called walk-ins. So can energy attachments be cleared through sound therapy? Yes, again, absolutely. High frequency healing frequencies can help to clear some of those attachments. We are talking about layers here. We are talking about ancestral patterns. They might clear some of the energy that lurks around our auric field, 100%. But if you think about ancestral patterns that we carry, I don't feel using sound therapy in itself can be enough to clear those more deeper inscribed energies out of our field. So sometimes we feel like, or you may see situations. Okay, what example? Let me just feel into this for a second. Um, let's say there is a situation where you know from your family background there's an element of abuse that has been going on for generations. So, for example, your great grandmother was or has been suffering some kind of abuse by her father, and then in the same bloodline, the abuse might have transpired to the uncle, to a niece, and it sort of trickles down the bloodline. If you see a pattern within your bloodline, pattern of alcoholism, pattern of abuse, I'm not just only talking about sexual abuse here, but also narcissistic behavior, for example, that can carry down through generations. Sound therapy wouldn't do justice to clearing some of those patterns that we carry, and especially also when it comes to the heavier attachments, um, such as darker entities. They can lurk in the field. They can be sort of out of the auric field, but they can still have an impact on the way you think and on the way you feel. And that's when we talk about AI or artificial intelligence. I will come to that in a second. I was just going to try to touch upon past life personalities. So, an attached entity or earthbound spirits can usually recall a past life or a death scene. And um, but at that moment in time, that person or that energy may not recollect of being able or having been able to transition into the light. And if that's the case, that could be triggered, for example, through trauma again, or triggered through drugs such as ecstasy, for example. Past life personality can be reactivated and brought into conscious awareness in the present time. So, which basically means is this is where Soul Center Healing comes in. We are not only clearing as much of these denser energies as possible, but also when situation presents, we're looking at past lives And very often there are past life scenarios that make us think, feel, behave in this lifetime in a certain way. So we might be able to clear our energy field again in the physical realm, um, clear our energy field within our physical body. But then how come that we constantly fall back to these patterns? And that could be a fractal of yourself, a past life of your soul experience right now that is still active from the past. So we bring it back into the past and we are susceptible to those energies to come in as soon as we in the now physical body expose ourselves to low frequency activities, which are called low frequency activities, which is alcohol, drugs, um, porn, watching porn excessively, and all of those sex addictions and everything that comes with it. I hope I'm making myself clear. It is a quite a um, complex topic. So basically, often past life experiences or personalities are still intact within our subconscious mind. Okay, let's leave this for now. Another question. Oh, thank you so much for acknowledging that. iPhone 34. Um, okay, question. Briefly describe what SCHH is and what it does. All right. Okay, Soul Center Healing Hypnosis was developed by a beautiful lady called Laura Whitworth, and she comes from a psychology background, um, and she is a very, very experienced healer and has been dealing with people with various mental disorders and imbalances for a very, very long time. So she created the framework of Soul Center Healing Hypnosis. So what that means is that in a state, a client through visualization, through a meditative process, is being put into theta brainwave state. Theta brainwave state is important because we can access deeper aspects of our existence without necessary interference of our logical mind. It doesn't mean that you will not remember. It's not like hypnosis where you see magicians on the stage and they put somebody in hypnosis, knock them out, and they can do everything with them, and then they don't remember anything. No, you will go through this experience fairly conscious. So you will remember. However, through a guided process, we go step by step through clearing energetically what is going on. And then very often naturally, the second component of the SCHH process is that we tap into past lives. Exactly for the reason that I have stated before, because often we carry those past life patterns subconsciously. We don't really know it, but we carry them. So this is where past life experiences come in, past life clearing comes in, and also important for the client to understand what is going on. Because as soon as we bring in our conscious, now I understand why I constantly shift my addictive behavior. I maybe manage to get rid of my alcohol addiction, and then I take on the next addiction, addicted to food, addicted to porn, to sex, and we don't really know what's going on. But often past life can shed light onto that. So past life regression as being part of it. And then finally, and only, and this is a very, very rigid protocol that is being followed in a SCHH session. I'm just gonna block out the name of this. This, for example, gives you an indication of a form that is guide for me to go through all the different energy centers and tick all the boxes. Have we cleared, for example, have we cut any cords? Have we closed any dark portals, any AI portals, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it's a very rigorous process of clearing, cleansing. Only when that is done, then we can tap into the client's higher self or source or soul connection, and that will give the client an opportunity. Of course, all of this will be discussed prior to the consultation, prior to the session with me, where we then have a chance to ask the higher self of the person to get some answers on some questions. For example, what is my life purpose? Why am I still, after having done so much work with my mother, why am I still sort of um, trapped into these patterns? So basically, only when our energy field is clear, when every clearing that could be done in that session has happened, only then as a third part of SCHH process, we link into higher self and give an opportunity to channel, download, get some answers for the client. And these questions often have been discussed prior to the session. But the primary focus of SCHH is to clear. And there are aspects, and it is like another layer of an onion. It doesn't mean that once you have had one session, it is always everything is done and everything is rosy and your life is all jolly and not necessarily. And I have to be quite honest, but it's very important to allow an integration phase for about 2 months, 6 weeks, 2 months, to integrate these experiences because it's quite heavy work. And very often clients feel extremely exhausted. They feel light afterwards. They feel, and you can literally see in their faces that something has shifted, something has changed. They feel much lighter, but often quite exhausted. It's like you're being put, like when your computer starts to struggle, you go into rebooting your computer. That's basically what SCHH is. Complete total reboot, and then you reprogram, you restart your hardware system again after a session like that. Okay. Um, any more questions before we conclude? I wanted to just, yeah, I mean, this is pretty much a summary of the different types of energies and entities that I have collated over the years to get an idea of what can actually present itself. That's a document of 11 pages. Um, but I wanted to touch upon one thing because that has become okay. Let's briefly talk about so-called non-human entities. As I said before, there are substance spirits that can latch onto us. So if you work and use hallucinogenic and consciousness altering drugs, for example, you make yourself susceptible to those spirits. And then there are energy manipulation that can take place because of experiments going back into ancient civilizations, which you may call like extraterrestrial visitors. So I've had clients that keep telling me they have visitors from extraterrestrial beings, and these beings, I'm giving them all the gifts, like the gifts of seeing, psychic abilities, but in most of the cases, it's actually been a manipulation and a control um, where that has happened. So some beings do not want to come through the portal in the light to engage in the um, cycle of the earth, but they selfishly attempt attach to themselves to a living human to simply experience the to live life through the sensory experiences of a human being. So very often extraterrestrial beings, they do not want the dense physical body, but still they want to experience how it feels to see, to live life through the senses. So, um, yeah, there's much more. Let me just have a look before we come to AI. So, how should we work with plant medicine to avoid spirit attachment? Thank you, Dan. Um, I have worked with plant medicine in the past. Up until 2020, I visited my teacher, my shamanic teacher, in the depths of the Peruvian jungle on a regular basis. And I wasn't aware of the impact of what these kind of these spirit attachments that come because of mind altering drugs or herbs. I wasn't aware of that. So now, if I were to work with some of those ancient plant medicines again, I would make a very, very conscious effort to clear my energy field beforehand, to set a clear intention, and also my senses, my awareness would be in a space where I would notice when some of those darker energies actually come in. So I would do a lot of prep work before I would go into an ayahuasca ceremony. At this particular point in time, and I would use clear instructions when I take the medicine that I do not consent for any darker energies and entities to come through in the session. This is, for example, and then it's also very important to be very discerning where you would attend than those sessions. So if somebody offers an ayahuasca ceremony or any kind of mind-altering plant ceremony in the backyard of their home, um, in the middle of the city, and trust me, I have seen that people holding these ceremonies in central London, in different parts of the European continent. If the shamanic healer, the one who guides the ceremonies, if I feel there's something off, odd in his or her energy field, I would stay away. So just do your research. That's all I can say. Hopefully that has answered your question. There's also one important thing I want to mention here. Um, Group consciousness. Now, within our spiritual community, there are so many times when you scroll through Instagram or TikTok and people say, oh, we offer healing for the entire world and to bring love and light to different parts of the world to help clearing the energies. I would be very, very careful because that could be used as a portal to decipher the energy. That's where big mass gatherings in stadiums, rock concert, and honestly, once you see, you can't unsee. So um, these big group gatherings are often used to actually um, use for nefarious purposes and to alter people's minds and to make them do things for their own particular purposes. And these are more in darker energies and darker entities, which basically goes into talking about demonic entities. There are Luciferian energies, legions, minors, different categories um, of dark energy beings, that they are so-called smallest, they are the watchers, they are the lowest, they are some of them are of the elevated ranks. Um, yeah, so that demonic energy realm is quite vast. They don't have a physical body. They don't have usually have never had a physical body, but they are just working very often for the purpose of manipulating society, manipulating people, and they can come in groups, they can come in clusters. So this is why it's so important for me when I work with those energies to there's a certain protocol that I use which are which is part of the SCHH process, where you ensure that the person that is going through this process is actually safe um, and protected. So before we finish off, let me just come to electronic devices and AR. So, sorry, AI. Um, Electromagnetic frequencies emitted from computers, from phones, televisions, they can lead to feelings of being basically possessed and controlled by these devices. And we all, I believe, have had these experiences where we are being sucked into certain things after we have watched, sat on our computer, and all of a sudden we feel like, oh, I really want to go and eat something now, eat this junk food or eat that junk food. Basically, by running an AI signal, which is being transmuted subconsciously, you can do your own research. It's like diving down another Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. Um, of how for decades advertisement, for example, has been used to alter people's minds, to make them buy things and do things. Music has been used to make people do certain things. I remember my time when I was living in central London, and the advertisement as you go down the escalators into the underground, and then all of a sudden I feel like, why am I actually looking at being at home and then all of a sudden looking at stuff that usually doesn't interest me? So definitely, I believe that was an control by it. So these can be signals that clearly are meant to distort our thinking and moving it in a particular direction. Any other question? 34 is asking, do you work with people directly and not online? I do work with people directly. So the question is, do I work with people directly and online? Yes, most of my sessions happen online, and but I also do see people face to face who come to the retreat, and we have got an entire package around the experience of this energy and entity clearing, because I feel if you really go and take this deep dive, I would feel I wouldn't do justice. I wouldn't do a good job if I would just do the session and send you back off. So basically, our package is to have a 2 night stay, to help integrating, to settle into the space when you come here, and then you would have your session, which basically consists of a 1 hour, 45 minutes consultation, and then the actual hypnosis session or can take up to 3 hours, and then you have got some time to integrate. And online, You will get clear instructions on how to prepare, and also there's a follow-up afterwards. So the process is the same. However, the experience I find when people come face to face often is even more transformative. But in saying that, 80% of my clients are coming through online sessions. And that's the beauty of it. We can use technology for our own advantage. We can use it for nefarious purposes, but we can also use it for our benefit. And this is how the entire world is connected. So, yeah, I hope I answered that question. Coming to AI now, artificial intelligence is a growing threat, as well as not just a threat to the planet, I think, but also a threat to human beings and to the human freedom as such. However, if we are scared of it, the very fact that we are scared opens us up, makes us susceptible to having AI using us, and so that we become slaves of the technology. So by running an AI signal, basically it mimics extremely low frequencies. I think it was iPhone 34 asking about frequencies and how sound can help clearing those energies. These AI signals are usually very low frequencies, and and it's almost to be seen like an artificial intelligence parasite that can invade our central nervous system and starts to monitor our thought patterns, so that they can mimic them, that they can clone them in quotation mark, that they can create an avatar of you. Basically, they monitor through the patterns and emotional behavior, and they search for weaknesses within the human host's body, so they then can aggressively use this human body, use that weakness against us to plummet us into low frequency thoughts, thoughts of suicide, anger, fear, frustration. And that in itself then provides an opportunity to use those energies for their own nefarious purposes. So when a person has a weak spiritual energetic development or a weak character, together with a weak mind, it makes it much easier for the person to be manipulated and makes it more vulnerable to AI signals. So they basically prepare the body to host certain information and then actually use it. And AI here, there's also something called AI implants. And again, I have had this many times happening where people say, "Oh, I've had the most amazing dream. And in this dream, this extraterrestrial being came to me and put an implant in me. And with this implant, I'm now able to astral travel, to do this and have got all these psychic abilities." For me, that's a red flag. I would think, okay, because that is an opportunity for AI control, mind control. There are various programs in military interventions that you can research and dive into that use exactly mind control programs to make people, soldiers, do what the dark and nefarious beings want them to do. So with this, I know I was hoping, thank you so much for those who actually ask questions. It's very helpful. So I thought we will just dive a little bit into the different types of energies. There's so much more. There's also black goo, which is known as a unique substance that can be found in people's bodies physically. And I have done energetic work where I saw, or people that were present actually saw a black cloud lifting off a person. Um, and that's called black goo, which often is a fuel or a power to help um, organize technology, a power to help manipulating people's minds through technology. And this is often also found in children with severe disabilities, autism, because it creates a dynamic um, in that family where everybody sort of is being drawn into that. And if you are not aware of it, that can be used for negative purposes. Um, Artificial DNA can also be a store base for these AIs and implants. I mean, there's so much more. I think we have to stop right now. Hmm? Any final questions before we conclude? And thank you for those who have been present here today and for those who visit and watch the recording at a later stage. If there are no final questions. So those, if you want to find out more about my work, you can just basically go into search engine and Google ARC Retreats, Awakening Alchemy Retreat Center in Scotland. And you can have the link to the website and you can see the different services on the website. So it's Awakening Alchemy Retreat Center. The best is to put it in a search engine and it takes you to the Google page with all the different links to the website. There are many testimonials on the website for people who actually have gone through this process. Um, and if people have a question, you can always send a ticket through the website and I will endeavor to answer any further questions. So with this said, thank you very much for your time. Like my friend says all the time, your time is the most precious thing that we can give. So thank you for spending time here the last hour to listen to me waffling on about entities and spirits and what have you. Take care and all the best.